Rand Paul calls out the Senate Republicans who want to expand the deficit by $2 trillion and refuse to codify the DOGE cuts. What is going on?
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to get to some foreign policy, but first, what's going down here in Washington as the big, beautiful bill, as it's been called, is now heading to you in the Senate. The Hill says this: House GOP leaders spent weeks in delicate talks with Republican holdouts before cobbling together a fragile agreement. The critical voices of the House debate are cautioning their upper chamber counterparts not to alter their design too severely, or it will never get through the House on its return. We'll talk about some of your specific objections, but how much does that worry factor into your calculus, whether or not what you do in the Senate can get back through the House?
You know, the bigger a bill, the more it includes, the more difficult it is to get everybody to agree to things. I supported the tax cuts in 2017. I support making them permanent, so I support that part of the bill. I support spending cuts. I think the cuts currently in the bill are wimpy and anemic, but I still
Seriously, we need cuts that are healthy and meaty.
would support the bill, even with wimpy and anemic cuts, if they weren't going to explode the debt. The problem is,
He's right on this. Look, it does. It explodes the debt. And that's a problem. Our debt is a problem. Okay, the bond vigilantes are floating out there in the universe, and they've already shot a few shots across our bow. We need to pay attention.
the math doesn't add up. They're going to explode the debt by, the House says $4 trillion. The Senate's actually been talking about exploding the debt $5 trillion. This year in September.
So what's $5 trillion, right? I mean, what are we at? 36 trillion now? Why not throw some more right on the fire? Look, we're in a situation now where the debt is, spreading out, okay? This is not a good situation.
When our fiscal year ends, the deficit will be about $2.2 trillion. Now, people used to always say, the Republicans would say, well, that's Bidenomics, that's Biden spending levels. When March, virtually every Republican other than me, voted to continue the Biden spending levels, which are going to give us a
That's right. And a bunch of those guys wouldn't codify the DOGE cuts. So what does that tell you?
$2.2 trillion deficit. Now, if you increase the debt ceiling $4 to $5 trillion, that means they're planning on $2 trillion this year and more than $2 trillion next year. That's just not conservative. So I've told them if they
It's also not sensible.
strip out the debt ceiling, I'll consider, even with the imperfections, voting for the rest of the bill. But I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion. There's got to be someone left in Washington who thinks debt is wrong and deficits are wrong and wants to go in the other direction.
Washington is the imperial city. That's why they don't care. They're all going to do fine. It's the American people who will suffer in the long run.
The idea that we're going to explode deficits, and the projections are now looking at over $3 trillion in deficits over the next 10 years, I think is just, not a serious proposal.
So the debt ceiling is going to come sooner or later, and Republicans, many of them, and those who advocate for including the debt ceiling being raised within this measure say, take it off the table now, because otherwise you're going to have really knockdown, drag-out fights with Democrats further down the road. They're going to have more leverage when you're facing that debt ceiling. So do you cede something by taking it out of this bill and leaving it for further debates?
She's not wrong here. Her question is a political question, and that is the game that is played in Washington. The problem is anybody who wants to stand for the right thing in Washington is in the distinct minority, as Rand Paul knows.
Maybe to Democrats' advantage down the road.
Well, they want to take it out of this bill because it is a walk of shame. Every time the debt ceiling raises, the people who've been voting for the spending have to walk in shame to the front of the House or the front of the Senate and say, yes, I've been voting for all these deficit spending, and now I'm willing to vote to raise the debt ceiling.
Yeah, it's real hard to call yourself a fiscal conservative if you're voting to expand the deficit, and this is an annual number, by $2 trillion.
I would say the opposite. I offered an amendment 2 weeks ago to raise the debt ceiling for 3 months. That's $500 billion, believe it or not, for 3 months. And the reason I do it every 3 months and force the vote is it's a point of leverage. It's an inflection point at which we can look back at leadership and said, you promised you were going to cut spending. Oh, you promised tomorrow. You promised next week. You promised next year. But you know what? You're not doing it, so I'm not going to raise it again. So this leverage.
This is a great idea. Fantastic idea. I mean, the fact that it's $500 billion additionally is not so good, but it would put people on the record periodically. They would have to show their cards, which is probably the reason why we won't see it.
Would work. If you do it for 2 years, you're right. It goes through all the elections, goes on the back burner, and the debt accumulates like it always had. This is more of the same. This is what the Democrats have always done, and this is the Republicans using the same playbook.
Okay, let's talk
Yep.
about things where some of your GOP colleagues there in the Senate are worried about too many cuts to specific programs. They're worried about impact on Medicaid. They're worried about SNAP. And really this idea.
Oh, yeah, no reform at all. The Republicans are concerned. It's worth noting again that SNAP is a giant crony capitalist boondoggle. Okay, the number one purchased item on SNAP is soda, sugar soda. Okay, it's making, the substance makes people sick. It is the number one most subsidized item on SNAP. And guess what? Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all of those companies, they love SNAP. And that's why some of their representatives in Washington are concerned about cuts to SNAP.
That if you add work requirements or make it tougher to access those assistance programs, millions of people could be thrown off of health insurance. They could lose their access to food and medical coverage and insurance. So as a physician yourself, where do you stand on those arguments?
Well, see, on the one hand, you can offer people free stuff. You can say, I'll give you free health care. And people are, oh, thank you for free health care. But what you don't tell them is we're borrowing the money from China to pay for your health care. So we run a deficit, $2 trillion, which leads to.
And this is just a great window into why it's so difficult to be fiscally sane, okay? Because it's hard, all right? People don't like hard, all right? They want their program. They don't want to think about the consequences, where the money for that program came from. For a lot of people, they don't even, I mean pretty sophisticated people, particularly in the Democratic Party, they don't understand. They think that there is such a thing as a free lunch. And even if they understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch, they really are like, well, screw it. I want what I want now. And what matters to me is what I want now. The deficit, who knows about that?
Inflation, which leads to rising prices, which squeezes you on the other side. So the bottom line is there is no free lunch. You can offer people free stuff.
What do we say?
But if you're borrowing money to do it, you end up punishing them with inflation. The same people that are getting the free stuff are also being punished by inflation and never seem to.
Yeah, this is one of the things that people just do not get. They don't understand where inflation comes from. I mean, there are seriously, again, some of these people that at least think of themselves as sophisticated, economically speaking, politically speaking, who really think that the rise in price, I remember 6 months ago, there were these people saying this, that it's price gouging. That's the reason prices are increasing. That's not why. Listen to Rand.
To creep out of poverty or climb up out of poverty. So it's a bait and switch. It isn't good. But I do think the deficit is a threat to our country. I think it's the greatest threat to our national security. And so I think you can't do this. We bring in about $5 trillion in revenue and we spend $7 trillion. That's about what we do. The $5 trillion is consumed by Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and other welfare programs. The mandatory programs consume all of it. So the people say, well, we're taking this off the table and we're not going to touch any of those programs. Well, they're just not, frankly, serious.
We actually disagree with Rand Paul here. We do think these people are serious. They are serious about staying in office. They are serious about continuing down the gravy train or staying on the gravy train that they have, okay? They know that if they really say, okay, we've got to get serious and cut some of the spending, they're done. I don't know how to solve this problem. This problem goes back decades and decades. If you have a huge portion of the population addicted to government and then you cut the supply of the addictive substance, people are going to freak out. That's just the way it is.
I'm all for the DOGE cuts, and I'll vote for every one of them. But, the administration now is afraid to send them back because Republican leadership on both sides is saying, we're not sure we can pass a $9 billion cut. And so what we're...
Seriously, that's pathetic. As David Stockman, Ronald Reagan's former budget chief, says sometimes, it's a rounding error. Truly, $9 billion, you can't get $9 billion. We're talking about, doing a deficit of $2 trillion. You can't get to $9 billion.
Really stuck with is the math doesn't work. All the great DOGE stuff, all the great stuff Elon Musk has done is out there, and people are going to wake up in about 2 months and say, how come the deficit's still $2.2 trillion? Where did the savings go? People are going to be very disappointed, conservatives, and I'm the one ringing the alarm saying they're not doing anything. They're not sending us a rescission package. They're not cutting spending.
They're not cutting spending.
Somebody has to stand up and yell, the emperor has no clothes, and everybody's falling in lockstep on this. Pass the big, beautiful bill. Don't question anything. Well, conservatives do need to stand up and have their voice heard. This is...
Always question. Always. Okay, this is something that the new left got right in the 60s. Question authority. Now, they have abandoned this whole idea with the new left, which is conform, fall in line, be a lockstep automaton, and do as you were told. But back in the 60s, they were right. Question authority. Question. Always question.
A problem we've been facing for decades now, and if we don't stand up on it, I really fear the direction the country is going.